Welcome to Brewing TV, the most serious episode of Brewing TV, the most sour episode of Brewing TV. We have notes, we have talking points, we have many sour home brews to try. My colleagues, Josh Volz, Dan Booty, we're going to drink these beers. We're going to tell you how they taste. We're going to show you how they were brewed. We're going to tell you about how they were brewed. But first, we're going to go and talk with a certified cicerone and learn more about sour beers. Stick around. All for brew.
Brew for all.
Wrong. Brew for all. Much earlier this year, we had the swell idea to do an episode on sour beers. Hey guys, let's just do a tasting tour of commercial beers from Belgium. It'll be easy. But our simple plan quickly sprawled into this beast of an episode when we brewed our own sour beers. Those are coming up in a few minutes. First, the original starting point for our journey into sour beers. The Ale Jail, one of my favorite bottle shops in the whole wide world, right here in St. Paul, Minnesota. Our host, certified cicerone, and the Ale Jail's former beer manager, Adam Schulte. Since our shoot, Adam has moved to Chicago to work with artisanal imports. Their gain, our loss. But for our night at the Ale Jail, Adam curated an amazing lineup of top-shelf sours. You want to give us a quick survey course in the classic sours of Belgium?
Well, these would definitely be some of them.
And we're drinking the Homebrewing right now.
Yep. Right.
This is the
Flanders.
Leafmans.
The Leafmans, yep, Flanders. Hoedenbond, actually. So it is Flanders Homebrewing by style. This particular beer is not aged in oak. Most sour beers in Belgium are. So this beer gets fermented in steel. So it doesn't pick up a lot of the, earthy oak, vanilla, some of that toasted oak character that you'll get. And then the microflora that exists inside those oak barrels obviously doesn't have an impact on the brown ale. So much less acidic in nature than the Flanders red beers, which is what the Rodenbach 2007 vintage ale is.
This is Rodenbach's 2007 vintage oak-aged ale. So basically all of Rodenbach's beers are blends. This particular beer is an exceptional flavor from a particular barrel that the brewmaster said, wow, this is amazing, I'm going to bottle this individually. And there's no blending going on whatsoever. This is all from barrel number 230.
One thing I pick up a lot in this beer is a much more prevalent oak flavor than the other Rodenbachs, and obviously that's from the single batch. You're tasting all of that aged beer, and you don't necessarily have to understand the science behind sour beers to appreciate them. But I think when you do, you realize that they really are a miracle of brewing, because you're dealing with many different types of bacteria strains. Just a few. The most prevalent, you have the Pediococcus, the Lactobacillus, or a little bit of Brettanomyces, some Saccharomyces, a little bit of Acetobacter. But all of these different strains need certain things to make the complexity of this beer come together properly. So when you think in that mindset, I don't care how it tastes, just the fact that I can actually drink it makes me appreciate this biological wonder that is this beer.
Yeah.
The one thing I notice is that the beer doesn't come out and say one thing right away, nor does it finish as one thing. It kind of starts all together, goes through your palate all together, and finishes all together. It's like all those flavors are present throughout the entire sip.
Yeah. When you mentally move beyond it's a sour beer, and you really start to understand and appreciate the complexity within the beer, that sourness becomes completely secondary. Sticking on the topic of the sour and the acidic quality of these beers, how does temperature affect that?
Well, I think if you drink it too cold, it's going to be more refreshing, of course, and it's going to have a little bit more of a booze characteristic. Alcohol seems to come through a little bit more. The sourness will be more prevalent. As it gets warmer, it's going to drink more like a really complex red wine. I'm noticing right now as the bottle gets a little bit warmer that I'm picking up some spice notes, maybe a little bit of cinnamon.
This is the Lindemans Cuvée René. This is a goose.
This is one of my personal favorites.
Yeah.
Why did you pick this?
Well, I think it's a very accessible version of a goose, especially for someone that is just getting into sour beers. Not only because of the price point, but because its flavor isn't too intense. A lot of people get into fruit lambics with the Lindemans brand under like the Framboise or the Creek or whatever, and those beers are actually sweetened with syrup rather than actual fruit. So they're much, much sweeter. They were, well, I guess the theory is they were actually designed for the American palate because we appreciate things that are more sweet. But you're still getting that sour kick, and I think some people want to say, okay, let's get away from this sweetness and go right for the sourness. What can we have? Well, here's the next step. So if you're drinking Framboise and you're drinking Creek from Lindemans, try this. And then if you're afraid or offended by the acidity, just take some fresh fruit, blend it up, smash it in there.
Oh, good call.
Because you're not getting that sugary, syrupy sweetness, you're getting actual real fruit flavors. It's got a very citric flavor to it.
Yep.
It's very light, it's very refreshing.
And you talked about, a little bit earlier, you talked about some of these breweries, I mean, needing hundreds of years to achieve this sort of harmony.
Like let's say the Rodenbach barrels, for instance, are over 150 years old. So they've had 150 years to create these cultures that have become resident inside the barrels, and they continuously ferment beer, so no other bacteria is allowed to get in there, and they've just totally taken control, so they have a consistent product. If you start out with a new barrel, you have no idea what's in that barrel. So you're going to ferment a beer, and it's who knows what's going to happen, right? But over time, if you brew a batch of beer and you can inoculate your barrel with the beer that you've brewed, and you have control over your organisms, those organisms start to take control of the barrels and of the space that you are brewing in.
Thankfully, a lot of American breweries are taking that step. They're saying, hey, we're willing to do this. It's worth the effort.
We are about to taste Hansen's Experimental Raspberry Lambic, and this particular beer is a blend of young lambic and raspberries. The yeast goes through, or the beer goes through a slight secondary fermentation, and then it is bottled, and there aren't very many sugars left in the beer as it's bottled, which pretty much makes it completely flat when you taste it. Cheers.
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 So,
I'm in heaven again.
Wow.
this beer is a result of one of the only known lambic blenders left in the world. So Hansen's Artisanal. Basically, they don't brew their own beer. They buy different lambics from 3 other lambic producers in the area, and they age these beers in their cellar and then blend them to their own preferences and sell them under their own name. I mean, there's a serious amount of raspberry on the nose, but it's not like a sweet raspberry. It's kind of like a funky raspberry.
Earthy.
Yeah. Again, like all 4 of these beers, it's almost like the flavor is just escapes. As soon as you kind of say it's this, it's not quite that.
Changes.
And it changes. It blends into something else, and I think that's really the allure of these beers, is that you really can't peg it to one thing.
Well, to make it easy and accessible for many people, if you want to try some of the Flanders Reds and Browns, think of them in terms of red wines. If you want to try the lambics and some of the fruit lambics, even though the fruit can be somewhat overpowering in some of them, think of those as white wines. I think if you come in with that mindset and you're a wine drinker, that will be successful for you. If you've never had these beers ever before and your only perception of beer is, Pilsner or Kel or Budweiser or whatever, what you think of beer has never been what beer always was. So keep your mind open and rediscover the history that is beer and our own progression as a species, because beer has always been with us, and these beers have always been important to some people at some point in time.
A little knowledge is a dangerous thing, and I feel positively terrifying right now. Thanks a lot, Adam.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
Yes. Yes, that was a lot of theory. Theory makes me thirsty. Now we will learn and slake our thirst. For knowledge and beer, Dan Booty, you're first. What are we seeing?
Well, we're going to see some extract versions of a Flanders Red and an Oud Bruin. One thing is, as an extract brewer, don't be afraid to jump into sours. You definitely don't need to be an all-grain brewer. Steve Piatz is an extremely well-known lambic brewer in these parts. He brews nationally award-winning lambics all the time out of extract, so jump right in, don't be afraid.
Pretty straightforward brew day.
Not a lot of specialty grains to them, just a couple pounds or less. Not many hops. Obviously, sour beers typically use very little hopping, often aged hops, so that you actually don't have any hop flavor and very little bitterness, mostly used just for preservative. The Flanders Red is even simpler than the Oud Bruin. It's got a little bit less grain and definitely fewer fermentables. Just start with the specialty grains, steep them for a short time, usually shoot for 15 to 30 minutes. Just some nice complexity adding grains like aromatic and caraminic help you develop that nice red color that you're looking for, that the extract alone probably won't do. It has less than an ounce of hops in it total, easy boil, not many additions. Oak is great to add complexity to many sour beers, not all, but a lot. Definitely part of the Flanders Red style. Once you finish it up, pour it into the bucket. You want to make sure you pasteurize your oak cubes. These are added to the primary, as I mentioned, which is not always typical, but you don't want overriding oak flavor, you just want complexity.
So you used straight up Roselaire for both of these?
Straight up Roselaire for the Flanders Red.
For the Flanders.
The Oud Bruin, I pitch a clean ale yeast, 1056 or US-05, something like that, ferment it for 2 weeks, and then move on to the Roselaire after that. The goal is to keep it less sour, although if you let it, the Oud Bruin, I wait to add the oak until the secondary, just a little bit again, not enough where you're going to notice that it's like an oak barrel. You just want a little complexity. Oak in general can be added to sour beers different ways. With these, I didn't want any of the bourbon flavor or wine flavor, so it's just simply pasteurized in hot water. But I've certainly done other sour beers where I did use bourbon soaked oak or even red wine or white wine soaked oak cubes to add different components. One thing that is very important when you brew these sour beers is to dedicate any plastic equipment that you put the sour beer into specifically to sour beers. We try and label the racking canes, auto siphons, and tubing as sour only. This also goes for buckets, lids, and potentially even airlocks, although that's a little bit less important. The fear is cross-contamination. Bacteria is far more hardy than Saccharomyces or standard ale or lager yeast, so it's very easy for that bacteria to get harbored in scratches or any imperfections in the surface, even as small as caused by your finger rubbing across a bucket surface. Let's open them up.
Okay, so these are the same recipe, similar recipe?
Yes, these are the same recipes as the ones brewed out in the warehouse. The first one is a Flanders Red. It's pretty basic, mostly your standard Pilsen or light DME, a little bit of amber, a little bit of wheat, and a couple specialty grains, and then of course throwing the oak in the primary. It's still not real sour. I mean, it's got some sourness to it, but it's not as bracingly sour as some can get. Obviously with sours, you can run the gamut from very delicate and subtle to in your face, slap you silly sour, where people pucker their mouths and can't handle the burn.
How old is this bottle?
This is about 1.5 years old.
Okay, so it's going to continue to increase in acidity with age.
All right, and here we've got the Oud Bruin that was done. This has more malt in it and more specialty grains, so added complexity, shooting for more of that cherry flavor. I think this beer, as it stands right now, is possibly a better Flanders Red than the one we just drank, even though it was brewed as an Oud Bruin because it wasn't blended. It's a little more sour, has even more of that nice cherry flavor. The Roselaire blend does have a few different bacteria, so you get a little bit of that Brett funkiness in the nose, but it's more lacto dominant, so it's more sour than funky with a lot of Flanders beers.
Nice work. These were both extract.
They were extract.
The obvious choice when you think about sours is something Belgian, but that's not necessarily the case. In history, archaic European beers, a little touch of the Brett. Josh, what have you got for us?
What I've got here is an experiment that went all right. I found 3 all-grain kits hanging out around the warehouse for 15 gallons worth of beer, and condensed that down to 10 gallons and ended up brewing a Brett Barrel Imperial Porter Stout with it. The first batch we got here is about 14 months old. A little different than the second batch here, which is 3 months old. The primary fermentation with this guy was done with the California lager yeast at about 60 degrees for primary. Racked that off into secondary. Once we were in secondary, that's where I added the Brettanomyces clausini. Chose that strain because it's more subtle, a little fruitier. Mango was one of the descriptive terms that I really wanted, and went for that. Also, once it was in secondary, I added 2 ounces of medium Hungarian oak.
So this is the same, we're going to get to taste the same beer basically, but at different ages.
Different ages, and when I decided to brew it again, the only thing I changed up was we pitched directly on top of that bacteria cake instead of doing primary with yeast.
We use all parts of the buffalo.
All parts.
So obviously I've seen the footage, I've seen what you did here, and this is a lot of grain for 10 gallons of beer.
I can't remember the total amount, but it was somewhere around 30 pounds of grain for 10 gallons of beer. It was kind of challenging mashing in. Definitely took the work of 2 people to make sure we had no clumps. Hop additions, I believe I had less than 2 ounces of hops in the 10-gallon batch. Again, just concentrating on the bacteria aspect.
Which version do you want us to taste first?
Well, I think we should go with the old version first. You'll notice the color on this. It's almost opaque, but if you get it up in the right light, you can see the deep red mahogany look to it.
It's so much more of that smooth chocolatiness through the flavor, but there's this little underlying current of that fruity, slightly funky Brett.
That's my favorite part about the Brett C, is that just the fruit characteristics of it.
There's a little bit of pineapple in the nose that I get now too.
Can I get a cup? Oh yeah, this is one of Chip's favorite beers, I forgot. It's over there.
Yeah, this is like Christmas. Brew TV Christmas.
You're pretty generous with your aged beer there, Josh Bolts.
It took all my willpower to not drink any of this over the last couple months when I found out we were doing a sour episode.
That's a good topic, actually. Extract all grain, direct pitch of a blend versus single cultures, whatever. How do you keep from drinking this?
You brew more. Don't be afraid to do sours because of the time involved. Already these beers that we brewed on the brew day, they're a couple months behind us. Time flies if you get busy and just brew more. And with sours, it's especially Flanders or Lambics, it's nice to do them every 6 months or a year so that you have different versions. You don't want to brew one, wait till it's good, drink it all, and then be stuck without more sour beer.
I think a good rule of thumb is, other than checking your airlocks, you should be able to wipe a pretty good layer of dust off that carboy before it. So here we have the 3-month-old version that was pitched directly just on the bacteria cake. I highly doubt there was much yeast alive, because that bacteria cake waited about 2 months to be used. So
all that nice tropical fruit and chocolate is there, but it's got, like you were saying, it's kind of got these like plasticky, butterscotchy overtones that have dissipated with the older version.
Yep.
But this one's going to be really good.
Although the tropical fruit seems to be already coming on a little stronger this time since the bacteria was in there the whole time.
Year 2006, I brew a Dawson's Creek. This is an extract batch. Year 2011, I separate it. The liquid portion of that batch of Creek gets blended with half of a 10-gallon batch of red ale. This becomes Roten Jan. Hey, hey, my. The other half of this batch of red, which was fermented with 1056 American ale, goes into an oak barrel with a pack of 3763 Roselaire ale. This is Jan Roten. The king is gone, but he's not forgotten. The guts from the 2006 batch of Creek, that is the cherries, the Brettanomyces, the yeast, whole lot of I don't know what, in a very dusty carboy gets blended with a batch, boom, of Caribou Slobber in 2011. This becomes Ode Caribouin. This only needs 1 week to become sour. That was a lot of Creek guts. I brew another batch of Caribou Slobber. I reuse the Creek guts. I add some really old plum puree that my dad had sitting around from some batch of wine that he never made. Boom, this is Plum Caribouin. It's still in the carboy. We'll see you in 5 years. The cool thing about using cakes, like bakers who make sourdough, talk about naming their culture. I had a sourdough culture named after saxophonist Joe Henderson. He made some good pancakes. But you kind of get this relationship with your sour cake too, right? Your beers start to have a family tree. They've got a history.
I've got an old ale cake that's kicking around. I call it Old Booty.
This is Roten Jan, the blend of Creek and red ale.
The carbonation in this brings up a good point on bottling your sour beers.
What's that point, Dan Booty?
Be careful.
I used heavy-duty champagne bottles.
That's a good practice.
And I made sure that the base beer was fully attenuated and fully finished fermenting before I added a very carefully measured amount of sugar and bottled it with the old sour stuff.
And why do we say be careful?
Because hang on, I know this. The bacteria will continue to ferment sugars that Saccharomyces cannot. And it's very easy to overcarbonate.
Nailed it.
Boom. You take a measured portion of each beer, put it in glasses side by side. I did 3-to-1, 1-to-1, 2-to-1, a few other combinations. Tasted them all. And I kind of had an idea beforehand of what I was looking for.
I think that's a good point, is measuring all of your samples beforehand and doing the mixes rather than tasting and saying it needs more of this and then adding, because by the time you're done you have no idea what your percentages are anymore.
Brewing beers like this is a really cool combination of totally surrendering control, like with those extended primary fermentations like you were talking about, and just kind of like putting it in the hands of your old booty or your Wolf monster. And then also, being really careful with your priming sugar, being really careful about the proportions of your blend.
Can you taste that Creek? Like the essence of that Creek in its full
cherry, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can get the cherry. It's way subtler at this proportion.
The Brett is really mild, which is always stronger in Lambics.
The other half is in an old wine barrel that I had, a 5-gallon French oak barrel that I'd been using for wine and had just sort of ridden into the ground. And that, I think, is going to ultimately be more of a true Flanders type red. I just did the primary with 1056 because I wanted a neutral base beer for blending, and I inoculated with 3763 Roselaire as it was going into the barrel. And I'm going to leave it there for a long time.
And then what's going to happen with that barrel once you pull that beer out?
Oh, it's going to be all nice and inoculated. All that lactobacillus and Brettanomyces is going to be living in the pores of the wood, and so I can just rack another beer in as soon as that one comes out.
Yeah, speaking of the barrel, a really cool thing to do, especially with your club, is get a large barrel, fill it with really good sour beer once it's peaked, pull 5 gallons off, add 5 gallons more, and you've pretty much a fresh wort, and you've pretty much got a never-ending supply.
The one that started it all was it was a kit, like a Northern Brewer kit, the Dawson's Creek recipe that I had brewed in 2006, and like we were talking about, you gotta forget it. It had been sitting around in my office at work for literally 5 years. And literally, like Josh was talking about, it had a layer of dust that thick on it. The sediment, the lees in the bottom of that carboy, the cherries, and the bacteria, it was a thing to behold. It was kind of disgusting. The pellicle on it was about as thick as my forearm. It was formidable. After siphoning it off, I had about 3 gallons of good liquid for blending and a gallon and a half of slurry for inoculating some other poor innocent beer, like a caribou slobber kit that Chip and I had brewed for some DVD shoots. And with that mighty bolus of creek guts, it did not take long to achieve it. It was ready to come out of contact with the cake after a week or 10 days or something very short like that, kind of like how sour Josh's new old ale has gotten so fast. So I needed something else to do with that creek. Can't leave those guts unattended. It needs something else. So I had another batch of caribou slobber and a really old can of plum puree sitting around. So they both went in, and that is the plum caribou. That's going to get to sit for a little while longer. The field is kind of wide open.
It is. I mean, you can run the gamut. You got malty beers, like I like to do this old ale with the Y East Old Ale blend a lot. There's Josh's beer, which starts pretty malty and still has that nice malt character in the end. You've got really dry, crisp beers like Berliner Weiss that are so sour that you can feels like you're eating a lemon.
People hesitate to brew sours because, oh man, it takes like 18 months or 2 years. I haven't got that kind of time. But then 18 months or 2 years later, what do they say? Damn, I wish I had a sour beer right now.
Yeah.
That's totally preventable, dudes.
You're not doing anything for that 2 years with the beer. You've forgotten that it exists in your basement or in your office.
And then you're set.
And then you have to brew another one in 2 years.
That's just maintenance at that point.
Exactly.
Once you get over that hurdle.
Once you've got your nice cake, it's all good.
But then if you're like me and you put it on tap at home, then there's the really hard part of just staying away from it so you can savor it.
There is a reason why I like to bottle my sour beers. They last a lot longer in bottles.
Sour beers. They're multifaceted. There are many to choose from. They are within your reach. As homebrewers, they are more within my reach because I am sitting right here. I hope you have enjoyed this journey with Brewing TV and our colleagues Josh Volz, Dan Booty. A big thanks to our friends with benefits. Support the folks who support us. For Jake Keeler, for Chip Walton, for Josh Volz, for Dan Booty, I'm Michael Dawson, signing off. All for brew.
Brew for all.
Brew for all, guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
This beer's sour.
This beer's sour.
Oh, I think this beer went bad.
This is infected.
Yeah, what's the dumbest thing you've ever had someone say upon drinking a sour beer? that wasn't quite ready for it.
I don't like this.